begin research, we interviewed Dr. Obidwa, a professor at Mercer who grew up in Nigeria. We asked for her opinion on the tension in Nigeria.
The problem is the fact that the tension is very complicated, and the tension draws at so many things, given the kind of energy that we have in that space and the differences. Because the British didn't really rule. What they did was just put things in kind of boxes, and yeah, we function, right? But now they're out. It's like, okay, now the real story begins. And so far, it hasn't been a very easy ride. But if Nigeria can pull it off, I don't think there's any country in this world that cannot pull it off when it comes to political stability in the midst of a lot of challenges. Nigeria is a very complex society. We have all these different ethnic groups, even within the parliament, within the senators, where you have people of the same ethnicity. It does not mean that they all carry the same perspective or opinions.
While the story of political tension in Nigeria begins due to political decisions made by the British coloners, like Obidwa describes, it quickly becomes motivated by religion. In 1914, the country that we now know as Nigeria developed from two British colonial territories, divided into northern and southern regions. The British merged the two colonial territories, not because of any shared culture, economics, or political systems, but because they wanted the economic prosperity of the southern region to make up for the lack of economic contribution from the northern region. Besides a shared geographic location, the two regions had very little in common at the time, and still have little in common today, culturally speaking. The southern region is ethnically diverse and predominantly Christian, while the northern region is more homogeneous and predominantly Muslim. The southern region is more open to the influence of the Western world, which has caused groups from the northern region to retaliate in the form of terrorism. The major terrorist group causing political instability is Boko Haram. Members of Boko Haram have been kidnapping children and committing savage killings in an effort to restore their idea of traditional Islam and rid Nigeria of Western influence. The destruction caused by Boko Haram has only worsened the issue of poverty that plagues the nation.
"61% of Nigeria is in poverty, and almost 100 million people are living on less than $1 a day. A lot of poverty is due to the fact that there is persistent conflict between different communities to access land and other key resources that have negatively impacted the livelihoods and the well-being of the people. There is also a large growth in population, which causes fights for resources among communities. The fact that there is not a stable government impacts the poverty rate, and this is influenced somewhat by ethnic conflict. On the social aspect, there are major gaps between Muslims and Christians when it comes to education. Christians have a greater advantage when it comes to education, and it causes the Muslims to lag behind. This gap in education is mainly due to the fact that Christians invest more on human capital, and Muslims invest more in ethnic capital, which gives Christians an advantage when it comes to the quality of education. Nigeria has a long history of economic instability and religious conflict. However, even though religious conflict has played a role, it is not the cause for Nigeria's instability.
The history of economic instability in Nigeria and much of Africa goes way back to the colonial era. And if you've done any research on Nigeria or any other country in Africa, there is no way you're going to escape the legacy of colonialism and basically what it left a lot of these countries with. First of all, the whole colonial occupation of Africa was economic at the core, right? A lot of the countries, European powers that came into African spaces pretty much wanted territories that they could occupy for gain, for financial capitalistic gain. And a lot of the work they did, or a lot of the institutions and processes and systems they set up, was just to feed that value, that intent. So you find that many economic the economic structure of many countries in Africa was just based on export. You know, they were all export economies. So you have spaces where cash crops were cultivated, raw materials were harvested and sent straight to the ports, and those were exported out. So the structure, the foundation that was laid for a lot of these economies was not necessarily decentralized. It wasn't necessarily objective or even democratized. It was really concentrated on where the resources were, and basically the infrastructure that was built to connect those resources to the coast, and then get on the ships and then out. You know, what's happening in Nigeria is happening in Cameroon, is happening in many countries. It's just that Nigeria's story seems to be a little bit more, I would say, prominent in the minds of people because of the role and the place that Nigeria holds on the continent. So it's the most populated country by far. It has actually been what they call the giant of Africa. Setting. And poverty is not good for the environment. You know, when people are hungry and poor, it's difficult for them to do certain things. You know, even here, we have difficulty doing certain things when we are rich. And then you think about people who are poor, right? But one thing I know that happens in Nigeria that doesn't get a lot of press is the fact that everybody recycles in Nigeria.
Though the correlation between the two previous topics in environmental issues is harder to pin down, the problems outlined in the earlier segments of this video have negative repercussions on many aspects of day-to-day Nigerian life. As one might suspect, Nigeria faces many environmentally themed issues, though it might be hard to trace the link from these issues to the religious conflicts that are so prevalent in the society. The two are deeply tangled together. The poverty in Nigeria, directly brought on by religious strife, affects the environment in two incredibly distinct ways. On one hand, people entrapped in the cycle of poverty tend to be more conscious about their use of items that harm the world around them. After all, they cannot afford to continually replace and replenish their storage of plastics and everyday throwaway items as we are accustomed to doing. Because of this, they tend to use things to the greatest extent possible. This conscientiousness about resources leads to most people in Nigeria creating much less waste than we in America do. On the other hand, they do not have the resources to aid the world around them. The fossil fuels in Nigeria create an interesting point of contention. Essentially, large corporations are wrecking the ecosystem in the Niger Delta because of their aggressive tactics to gain control over the oil in the area. The people in Nigeria are unable to stop them due to their lack of knowledge about how these exploits affect their environment and their incredible financial disadvantage when compared to the more powerful corporations they face.
And the last part of that question
Is there hope for government stability in Nigeria?
yes, of course there's hope. There's always hope. If there's no hope, then everybody's wasting their time. There is hope, it's just that what it takes, you know, is just humongous, just a lot. And I feel that a lot of it is just going back to, because you're always going to have differences in opinion. We're always going to have not enough resources. We're always going to be living in a very difficult world. But I feel that if we're able to bypass all those things and come back to the fact that we're all human beings, you know, and you do to people as you would like yourself to be done to, there's certainly hope. There are countries around the world that are not wealthy, but they are living peacefully. I don't know of a country more diverse than Nigeria that is living peacefully, because that's another thing that we don't put into the question. The sheer size of the people there, the sheer differences between them, and the fact that we don't have enough resources. So when we analyze Nigeria, you're analyzing it like something that doesn't exist anywhere else.